Yes. Welcome to another great episode of the Ashish and Friends podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ashish. You can catch me on Instagram and on Twitter at Ashish Airy. I'm joined by my longtime friend and co-host. We got Dev Superlaser on Instagram and on Twitter. So give him a follow. Today, we're going to be talking about NBA roster moves, man. You know, off seasons happened. You know, teams have added players. They did the draft. They added players that way. They subtracted players. We're going to go through the NBA, talk about the contending teams. What did they do? What does their future look like in this upcoming season? And next week, we'll do our predictions with all the guys. So let's get it started. Dev, let's talk about your favorite team. All right, you're repping them
right off the bat. I got the old roster here in front of me. For reference, I got a little cheat sheet right here with the championship roster. I'm excited. I thought the Lakers made fantastic moves this offseason.
I mean, it is hard to think about, man. They just won the championship, and somehow they got better. All right. So let's talk about some of those moves. I mean, what were your favorite moves? Obviously, they lost Danny Green, right? They lost Quinn Cook, Rondo, McGee, and Dwight Howard. But you want to talk about some of the additions?
And Avery Bradley, too. So obviously, Avery Bradley wasn't there for the championship run itself, but he was important during the regular season, and he's a great player.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that, I don't know if there's, a specific favorite move. Well, obviously, the favorite move is extending LeBron, signing AD, right? That's the obvious. It was going to happen, but, 5 years of Anthony Davis, and we got 3 more years of LeBron. What more could you ask for, right?
Right. Yeah, and when you think about it, we thought, after they won the championship, they're going to lose some of these pieces. Somehow, man, they maneuvered, they made some trades, they added some players. I think they actually upgraded, those positions that they lost at.
Yeah.
Let me, we can talk about, Dennis Schroeder, right, over Rajon Rondo. I think that's fantastic. You bring in some youth. That guy was killing it with the Hawks and the Thunder the past few years. I think that's a great move.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited for Trez. I know that, look, I clowned him. Everyone clowned him during the playoffs. And I don't particularly like, especially the way he was treating Luka during that series. I was not a fan of that. But when you talk about him and his deficiencies, the one thing you worry about, he's a defensive liability. However, defensive liabilities, it's way easier to play defense when you got Anthony Davis behind you. It's a whole different ball game, compared to you're the only center on the court, or Zubac is the one that's backing you up, right? Anthony Davis, a little different, mechanics there. He's probably going to be slotting and guarding 4s instead of 5s, which will help him since he's undersized. And I think it's a good pickup, some good scoring, everything you need.
For sure. I mean, when you think about it, you're like, oh man, McGee's gone. You lost Dwight Howard. But the Lakers did a great job shoring up. First of all, you got him under value, right? 2 years, $19 million. That's a steal, okay?
Yeah, for the sixth man of the year.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a great move. And then you're like, okay, that's not enough though. And they added Marc Gasol, right? Come on, dude. This guy
and potentially Powell, right? That's a talked about move that might happen as well. So.
Right. But just with Mark, you have big playmaking type big, and someone who's really good on the defensive end too. So I think that's a great substitute
when spot shoot. So
yeah, exactly. And the other moves they made, they brought in Wesley Matthews as a replacement for Danny Green, which is fantastic. Way less money, just 1 year deal instead of the multiple years they owed Danny Green.
Yeah, so I would consider Wes Matthews, Danny Green. That's a bit of a side grade, maybe a slight upgrade to Wes Matthews, but either way, it's an upgrade in the amount of money, because Wes Matthews over Danny Green is a pure upgrade in terms of value, right?
Exactly. And the last thing they did, they brought back KCP for 3 years and $39 million. So I mean, they're looking real good for the next year. Probably the favorites by quite a bit. So
and the GOAT Jared Dudley is back.
I mean, let's be real. The real MVP that no one's talking about, the real savior of the Lakers, is Jared Dudley. Okay.
No, you need an enforcer. You got Dudley on the bench.
Yes, that's exactly it. Well, let's move on to the other LA team here. We got the LA Clippers. All right, we talked about them losing Montrezl Harrell, which is a big loss in my opinion. But also, maybe he was adding some fuel to the toxicity of the room, right? So maybe it was a benefit to them. They did a nice job of bringing Serge Ibaka to kind of fill that role, which I think is a pretty good substitute.
Yeah. So what I had heard is that Trez being there before and some of these other players who were with the Clippers in 18 and 19 really didn't like the culture change. So I think it kind of makes sense. He's gone, and Serge Ibaka, you could argue, is an upgrade for this team. So it's not that big a deal. I think this is a team. I wouldn't say they got better, but I don't think they got worse either. Right? They also basically flipped Shamit for Kennard. That's like, as far as I'm concerned, that's a side grade. So I know Shamit played really well in the bubble, so we have like a good memory of him, but he did not perform that well during the regular season. So we probably don't expect bubble Shamit the whole time.
Right. And I think the biggest thing to look at this team, obviously, you still have Kawhi Leonard, you still have Paul George, and they brought back their pieces. They brought back Patrick Peterson, Marcus Morris Sr., and Reggie Jackson as well, right? And they also brought in Nick Batum as some bench depth, so that's pretty good. Like I said, I think
they did lose JaMychal Green, which is a little bit of a big loss, but I don't think that's like world-ending or anything. That's something you can work around.
He looked so good during the playoffs was because Paul George was like nowhere to be seen, right? Like they needed the help from the three, they needed some defensive help. So I mean, yeah, you're right. It is kind of a loss, but I think they'll be fine. And like you mentioned, Ibaka is like I think a great defensive player, and he can shoot, right? So like that could probably benefit them in a major way.
Right, and Ibaka gives them that flexibility to play him at the 4 or the 5, depending on how they want to slot with Zubac. It lets them, because when you have when you have Ibaka now, you can put like Zubac on AD, Ibaka on Trez, right?
Yeah.
It gives you that like flexibility, especially in that Lakers matchup. And again, shooters never hurt. Having a shooter, it's never going to be bad.
Right, for sure, and we all know like Kawhi and Serge Ibaka get along really well, so I'm sure
good locker room pick, right? So
yeah, and I'm sure Kawhi appreciates that, like someone he's gelled with in the past. So let's see how that works over. We're gonna move on to maybe one of my favorite off seasons, and that'd be the Portland Trailblazers. Like I don't know how they had this much cap space to do what they did, but they ended up bringing in Robert Covington, right, which was an upgrade over Trevor Ariza, who they didn't even have during the bubble area, right? Like he didn't even come to Orlando, so that's a great 3-and-D player you've got. They added Enes Kanter, another big as like a backup to Nurkic, who had missed like most of last season, came during the playoffs,
and he's coming back, right? He was great for Portland in the playoffs 2 years ago or last year. The playoffs before the bubble,
right?
He was great for them, despite the Ramadan, the hardships. Like props to him. Like he'll always have my respect for that.
Yeah, that is totally true. That's really hard to do, but that is a great story if you haven't heard it before. But yeah, bringing him in, they brought in Derek Jones Jr. as well, like a good bench piece. They got Harry Giles on the minimum deal, which is he's a great center. I really love him. And they brought back Rodney Hood and Carmelo Anthony. So like, I don't even know how
And you didn't even talk about their biggest move. They got rid of Mario Hezonja. Huge move. Like how they flipped Mario Hezonja is beyond me. But that's like one of those players. Like this man is not an NBA player, and he had another year left on his deal. Right, he opted in, but they managed to get him gone. I really think that so the problem is, I think Portland might have had arguably the best offseason, maybe even better than the Lakers offseason. But the problem is they were a step behind, right? You're talking about an 8 seed, had a losing record last year. So do I expect them to make a jump? Yeah, I expect to see like a 4 or 5 seed from them. Am I expecting them to win a championship? Probably not.
Yeah, I definitely think they can definitely take a step forward. They obviously added Robert Covington, which is a great move, right? Like that's a solid 3-and-D player.
I mean, that's the glue guy for the Rockets, right? That's a huge pickup.
Exactly, and yeah, so you add that to like whatever you just had. You've Nurkic, being healthy for the full season, hopefully this upcoming season, which will greatly benefit them, right? And the fact that you could just keep all these good pieces, like Melo had a great last season, right? He was a good locker room guy for them too. So I'm expecting good things. We're we're talking about like contenders for playoffs, but like I think they're probably maybe a little step away from being that finals team, especially with the Lakers in the West. But definitely going to be a fun team to watch in this upcoming season.
Yeah, I agree. So when I looked at the West and I was looking like who got better, right? Yeah. And I think I can definitively say I think the Lakers and Portland both got better. I don't know if any of the other teams did, and we'll talk about them as we go through. But and another team that's already been discussed, right? They also got better. But
Well,
those are the real like teams that I'm like, okay, they really got better. A lot of these teams, side grades, losing big pieces, and it's tough. I mean, free agency's tough, right?
I mean, yeah, that's what happens during free agency, man. You can't keep everybody. You got to find replacements and substitutes, and do your best in the draft to either flip the assets or pick up some bench players.
Mhm.
Let's move on to the Dallas Mavericks. That's what I got listed here, and they added some good like small pieces. They had a fantastic draft.
Yeah.
I mean, they made a
That's the
great.
other team that I was alluding to, right? In case
Yeah,
any of the listeners didn't get it.
right. So when you talk about the Mavericks, last year they had a historic offensive season. I think it was the best of all time, right? So they ended up flipping, Seth Curry for Josh Richardson, a starter, right? That should be a starter on their team. Really good defensive player. And like I said, I think they just made like the right moves. They didn't have too much cap to work with, and I think this team's gonna be really good, really fun to watch. They should have a good season. I don't think they're finals bound by any means. I think what they're trying to do is trying to aim for next summer, bring in like a Bradley Beal, bring in like another All Star or like a solid number two or like even a good number three, and I think they'd be really good for the future.
Yeah, when you talk about the Dallas Mavericks, right, and you guys talked about it, check out that episode.
Yeah, I'll link. Me and Ryan last week we dived into the free agency and the draft. I'll link the episode below and probably put like a little thing up here. But yeah, check that out.
Yeah, so when we talk about the Mavericks, right, you talk about what do you need to do. The answer, build around Luca. What does Luca need? Defensive players, right? You already have KP. KP is not a bad defender, but when you're talking about a 7-footer, you're not getting like Anthony Davis level defense out of that slot, which is what you would ideally want, right?
Right.
So you're already looking at one bad defender, one okay defender. So you really need to fill it out. You've got Dorian Finney-Smith, right? He's a
Yeah.
good defender. So, adding that Josh Richardson over Seth Curry. Yeah, Seth Curry's a better shooter, but they don't need that, right?
No.
Like what they
No.
need is a defender, and I think it's a great pick.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, like DFS was probably the best wing defender before, right? Now you have Josh Richardson at that spot. Now DFS can guard like the second best player, right? And
Yeah.
I think that helps your team out immensely, right? And I think the biggest thing here is like they had lost pieces last season, right? They didn't have Dwight Powell for like half the season. Jalen Brunson was out; he was never in the playoffs, right? So you're just getting these pieces back. I think Luka takes maybe a little minor step forward, and he's probably plateauing to where he's going to be, and that's totally okay because that's a top 5 player in the NBA, and I love it.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that like if I had to put like money on an MVP right now, I'd probably put money on Luca for this year winning the MVP. So I just think what he showed in the bubble, we know KP is going to be out. That's going to help his narrative.
Yeah.
So look, he can start it off right on Christmas Day, get a win over the Lakers, and the MVP talks will start right from the beginning.
Exactly. It'll be a good showdown between LeBron and Luka and the Lakers and the Mavs. That'll be fun to watch on Christmas. But yeah, like I said, they kind of like they didn't have too much to work with. They're getting their players healthy. They just need to stay healthy. But I think it'll be a fun team to watch and they'll have a good season. Let's move on to the other D team, and that's the Denver Nuggets. They really showed out during the playoffs in Orlando. They did so well. Like we're talking about Michael Porter Jr. coming out of nowhere, really. Like during the playoffs, he was on a tear. Jamal Murray killing it, and of course we have the Joker, and he was doing his usual dominant thing on the court.
Right. So this is a team that I was really looking to make like a splash. I expected them to come out swinging in free agency, and they didn't do that, which was really disappointing. Right. So they did grab they re-signed Paul Millsap, if I remember correctly, and then they also did grab Jermichael Green from the Clippers, obviously, but they lost Jeremy Grant, and that's like a huge. That's like a huge piece that I really expected him to come back, especially because it's not like he took a ton of money from the Pistons. For that money, he could have stayed on the Nuggets. It just seemed odd that Jeremy Grant didn't come back.
That's totally true, but like I think Jeremy Grant did get paid like 3 years, 60 million, right? So it's 20 million.
Yeah.
I think they just want to keep some flexibility, right? They wanted to bring back the veteran Millsap because he's good for the locker room. He's good on both sides as well. Like you mentioned, they brought in Jermichael Green to kind of like fill in that void. He's obviously not as good as Jeremy Grant, but like he can do some of that type of action. And I think for them, they're just kind of expecting Jamal Murray to hopefully be more consistent, kind of show what he did during the playoffs.
If he can be what he was in the bubble, right? Then you're looking at this as like, okay, this might be a number 2 seed.
Yeah.
Like a contender for a title. But Jamal Murray has never been consistent, like throughout his entire career, and we saw in the bubble. But the one thing we did see that I think might translate: 45% shooting on 7 threes a game. If he can continue 7 threes a game at 40%, this is a scary team. You know?
Yeah. And that's for sure. And like we said, I think they're expecting to at least see some of that translate, whether it's in the season, but mostly in the postseason, right? Michael Porter Jr. took a lot of steps, during the bubble, and I think they're hoping that he's going to show that during the season. They're also bringing back like Will Barton, right? He missed a lot of time in the bubble. He got injured. Gary Harris will be healthy as well. So I think just having these bench pieces too will actually help them. So even though we didn't get like that,
they're certainly still in that category. But this was a team that, like, if free agency had gone right for them, they could have been a 1 seed, right? They could have been competing in that, and it didn't happen. But that's okay. They're still a contender. They're still going to be looking sharp here.
Yeah, definitely think they'll probably be like top 4, top 5 type team for sure. And they also drafted a big Zeke Naji in the draft. So let's see how that works out. Let's go to another, Western Conference team that we talk about that we get confused with them is the Utah Jazz, right? And man, they did a few things here. So Conley opted into his final year of his contract, so he's getting paid $34.5 million. They brought in Azubuike and Elijah Hughes in the draft, which is actually really good. They brought in Derek Favors, another big. They brought him back to Utah, which is awesome. And I think Jordan Clarkson got paid for 4 years and $52 million.
Right, that was a good pickup too. Like I did really like. I know Conley, he was obviously going to opt in, but he did not perform to what they expected. However, he's got another year. I do think we're going to see like a little bit of a resurgence from Conley, and they got the biggest move done. They locked up Donovan Mitchell, right? That's the most important move. That's what they needed to get done. We'll see if him and Rudy Gobert are going to work long term. Maybe you flip Rudy at some point, but Donovan Mitchell's locked up. That's what's important. That's what this team needed going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Conley would be worth it if he made that 3-pointer to win them the series, right? Like, then you'd be like, pay that guy $40 million, right? But I mean, I think going to next season, you're just hoping he doesn't slump off. Like, he wasn't horrible, but like, obviously, you're just hoping that he doesn't, drop off too much. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell is the star. That's what we want to build around, and he was amazing during the playoffs, right? We saw that between them and the Nuggets, and we were just like, man, we wish we saw more of Mitchell and this team. But I think bringing in Bojan Bogdanovic back, who's unhealthy last year, that will definitely help them in some major ways. And so bring in Derek Favors as well, backup big to Rudy Gobert. He's a rim protector. That's fantastic. And Elijah Hughes, a rookie that can score, right? Like in college, he was getting defended all the time, even, double teamed, and he still found a way to score. So I think that'll be a great bench option for them.
Yeah, I think the Derek Favors pickup you kind of alluded to. So Utah has had this little thing for a while where they kind of struggle on offense with Gobert, but they are awful defensively when he's sitting. And so hopefully Derek Favors can shore that up a little bit. Because man, like it's like a candy store when Rudy Gobert's on the bench, So
yeah, that's exactly the biggest issue they had. And I mean, I saw the stats between when Favors was on the floor with like a Zion Williamson, like even Zion, like he elevates the games of others because they don't have to worry on the defensive end as much. And like Zion did not do well without him on the floor, so that's something interesting to watch. But yeah, I think they made some nice little moves, and just getting players healthy will benefit them for sure. And let's talk about I think this is my favorite offseason, and that is the Phoenix Suns.
I did forget about this when we talked about the teams that got better. Obviously, the Suns.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. They need to bring in that 8-0 energy to this next season. All right. They need that bubble luck. But oh my goodness. They traded for Chris Paul, right? We thought maybe Chris Paul was done when he went to the Thunder. We're like, we don't expect anything now. But it's a hard contract too. But like, they did it. They brought in Chris Paul. Fantastic. They added Jay Crowder, a nice big wing for them. Yeah, fantastic. That is spectacular. Like, let's think about it. CP3 and James Harden took the like undefeatable Warriors team, right, to 7 games in the playoffs. Now you're teaming up CP3 with another guard that can really pour it in, and I think that's going to be fantastic. You've got DeAndre Ayton there, still growing and getting better, and now you add Jay Crowder to the lineup, and I think it's going to really help them.
And they picked up Jalen Smith right with the 10th pick. I think that's someone who can also help them. You're getting a lottery pick in on your team as well. You never know what to expect, but hey, he's going to get some opportunities. He's going to be on the bench, get some minutes, and they're not going to need much from him.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how he develops in his minutes,
Yeah.
but like that's someone definitely in the future you can pair up with DeAndre Ayton, right? He's
Yeah.
in away from the rim type big. He can shoot threes.
Yeah.
He can do that kind of defense. But let's see how he grows. There's no pressure on him either, which is fantastic, right? They also added Etwan Moore and Langston Galloway, great bench options for sure. And they didn't lose
Yeah.
Dario Saric either, so
They did lose Kelly Oubre. That's kind of a big loss, but they didn't have him in the bubble, and the best Suns team we saw last year was in the bubble, so maybe it just wasn't a good fit. So
Exactly. I think he's a flippable piece, and I mean,
yeah.
with Rubio, you weren't really getting the offense. With CP3, I think you kind of fill in some of that, those points that you're losing with Oubre. So overall, I really loved what they did. You bring in two starters to that lineup. That looks like a really, really good team, and they have a great bench too.
Yeah, so I don't know about you, but I expect this team to make the playoffs, right? This is a playoff team. I don't think that if this team gets out of the first round, that would be awesome. Like I would love to see that.
Right,
Well, assuming they're not against the Lakers.
yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, I think this is a playoff team. Like this is a crazy thing about the West. There's like what 11, 12 teams competing for 8 spots. And I think the best thing about this year is they're still instilling the rule of the play-in games. So even if you're a 7th or 8th seed, you're not guaranteed the playoffs, right? If you're 9th and 10th seed, you get to play in and you could possibly make the playoffs. And I think that is awesome for the West.
Yeah, we can talk about that more. I have some thoughts on it, but we'll get to that when we get to maybe the predictions.
Okay, sounds good.
So
Sounds good. But yeah, Jalen Smith, he has shades of like Serge Ibaka, so I'm looking for that for sure. But incredible offseason for sure. Okay, let's move on to the New Orleans Pelicans. Obviously, they switched their coaches. They got Stan Van Gundy in. They obviously signed their star player, Brandon Ingram, to a 5-year, $158 deal. They brought in via trade Steven Adams, right? I talked about losing Derek Favors, losing that rim protector. I mean, they got a slight upgrade with Steven Adams. They even signed him to a 2-year extension. I think that's going to be fantastic for them. They obviously traded away Drew Holiday to the Bucks. But they got a nice price back, right? I think that is a good ransom they got back for Drew Holiday, and it's good for their future, right?
He didn't really 3 first-round picks for Drew Holiday
and 2 swaps, right? Yeah. And
we don't expect the swaps to hit if Giannis resigns, right? But who cares?
Yeah, right, for sure. But I think when you're looking at the timeline, Drew Holiday didn't really fit that, right? He's a veteran. He's been in the league for so long. I think he's ready to win now type player. The Pelicans are still growing and getting better. So I think it's a great move, and they filled that position by drafting another guard in the draft. Kira Lewis is a great pick, and I think he'll be the starter, not to start the season, but in the future for sure.
Right. Didn't they also get Eric Bledsoe back in that trade? Am I correct?
Yeah, they did bring in Eric
Bledsoe.
So
that's obviously Bledsoe just was destroying the Bucks offense during the playoffs in the bubble. So we don't know how good a pickup that will be, but it'll be interesting. He's going to fit better in New Orleans than he will. You can't have 2 people who can't shoot on the court right now. That's just the kind of the way with the current NBA. When you've got Giannis who can't shoot, it makes Bledsoe hard to play. Zion has got some touch. Zion's got some range. Maybe, I know Lonzo this year actually did take a big step forward on his 3-point shooting. So, when you've got Lonzo, you've got Ingram, you've got Zion, maybe you can, Bledsoe becomes a valuable asset.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you get that veteran presence with some young guards in the locker room, which is great. I think hopefully we're just hoping for a healthy Zion Williamson for the whole year to see how this team plays. But I think they're definitely in the playoff contention, right? We'll see, it'll be very tight at the bottom of the playoff group, but let's see what happens there. But like I said, the Kira Lewis, he's a speedy, athletic guard. He can shot create for himself at the 3, and he has hustle, right? So you've got Ball, you've got Bledsoe, you've got Lewis Jr. in the backcourt. You might even start Redick, right? You got a 3-point shooter right there. And then you have your front court ready, Ingram, Williamson, and Adams. I think that's a pretty solid lineup for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I expect this team to be in that playoff contention. And with Zion, we talked about a lot of players that got better in the bubble. Zion was a player who got worse in the bubble.
Yeah,
So we'll see because, man, he was on a tear before the end of the season.
it's
And New
it's true.
Orleans was like, everyone thought, like, yeah, that 8 seed is theirs. Um, it
Yeah,
didn't quite
I
work
mean,
out, but.
there's just too much of a break. He started eating out again. He was getting he's gonna get Uber Eats or DoorDash and just enjoying that New Orleans food. But yeah, let's see what happens next year. I'm excited. It'll be a fun team to watch for sure. Let's move on to one of your other favorite teams. I know one of your favorite players who's not gonna be playing for this team next year, Klay Thompson. Let's talk about the Golden State Warriors right here. You can take it away, Dev. Let's talk about the additions and subtractions and what your thoughts are on Klay.
Yeah, so I love the Warriors, right? Like, I think that it's just like something about the team basketball, right? And a lot of people kind of clown on them for bringing in KD, and they're like, oh, they bought these two championships. But look, uh, Steph Curry is the only player on the team that's been tenured for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
That he's the only player, and Clay is going to be added to that list next year, and Draymond in 2 years. So look, this team has been a great drafting team. They have been just a fantastic, like their GM, like people were clowning him because he said they were light years ahead. Look, he has been light years ahead of the league. Like, props to I believe it's Bob Myers, right, is the GM.
I think so. Yeah.
But yeah, so props to him. I liked the pickup of Wiseman. Obviously, losing Clay is tragic, and you hate to see that. Like, my heart just like hurt when I got that news. That must have been the most devastating news of this offseason so far.
For sure, for sure. I mean, we're all looking forward to getting the Splash Bros back, seeing what the Warriors do, and he had just been recovering from an injury, right? So we're like, oh, he's finally healthy again, and then we lose him for the whole season before he even began.
And
So
an Achilles injury at that.
yeah,
And we're talking about December, right? So there's a chance we may not see him at the start of next season. Like,
right,
we may be waiting till Christmas or January to get him next year too. It's just tragic. I
yeah,
really thought this was when I looked and I saw, like, they picked up Oubre. Like, this is a team that could have been a contender, maybe a championship team, right up there with the Lakers.
yeah.
I still expect the playoffs from them. If we get 2016 Steph, who knows what could happen with this team, right? But
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I mean, Curry had a nice extended vacay last season, right? I mean, they're just tanking. He's like, I have an injury. I'm just gonna relax now. He should be rested. He should be doing great. I mean, like you mentioned, they brought in James Wiseman as their pick. At the top of the draft is a little cloudy who's gonna be the best pick, and I mean, it could be Wiseman, right? Like, you bring a big guy, you can pair him up with Draymond Green. I think you have a good center and power forward going right there. You know, Once they lost Klay Thompson, they brought in Kelly Oubre from the Thunder,
yeah,
right? He had been traded to the Thunder. They brought him in. I think that's fantastic. You get some scoring. And let's not forget, they also brought in like Andrew Wiggins, right? They traded away D'Angelo Russell. And now they have another, someone that can shoot for them.
yeah,
And
and they brought in Kent Bazemore too, right? So,
exactly. They brought some,
and I think he was on the Warriors in the past, right? So, bringing someone back in that,
yeah, yeah, bringing in Kent Bazemore, who had been, I think he's like a minimum contract for 1 year. I think that's fantastic. Brad Wanamaker from the Celtics, good bench depth. They also drafted Nico Mannion, who can also play make from Arizona in the draft. So I think we'll definitely expect the playoffs from them. It just sucks that they kind of move away from the title contender to just like let's see what happens with them. But I think they'll definitely be a fun team to watch and interesting to see the Warriors be good again.
yeah, I would. I mean, if the Warriors are good again, I think the league's better for it.
For sure, for sure. Well, let's talk about one of the worst cities of all time. That is Houston. Let's talk about let's talk about the Houston Rockets here.
All right.
All right, they obviously moved on from Mike D'Antoni. They brought in Steven Silas, who was the assistant coach with the Mavs. They brought in Dizana Diop as with the coaching staff. So
Yeah.
good things going their way for sure. I'll throw it to you, Deb. What are your thoughts on the Houston Rockets?
Right. So just to go on a little bit about Houston, right? This is a city that lost three GMs. They have three sports teams that lost three GMs this year. It's been a rough year for the city of Houston, especially when you looked at that Harden, the small ball. it was an experiment. I think that I personally think that we kind of go a little bit too hard on the Rockets. I mean, they lost to the Lakers, right? This is not like a oh man, you lost to a really bad team, right?
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
even like they lost to the Nuggets, right? Like this is a team that like I think that they were better than they showed last
Mm.
year, and the small ball, when it worked, it worked. The problem was the amount of strain and stress it put on. They just flipped, Westbrook for Wall. I don't know. This is a rebuilding team. Really, like in my dream world, I want to see if I'm Houston here. I want to see them blow it up, right? I want to
Yeah.
see rebuild time. And look, I know they don't want to because of Daryl Morey, but look, Ben Simmons is better than anyone else you're gonna get. Go get Ben Simmons for Harden. Like, just go make it happen. Um, it's going to be worth it. Like, if you can get Ben Simmons and 2 first rounders, that's a great trade for James Harden. Um, I think that's really who you should be looking. If I'm the Rockets, there is no chance I'm trading him to the Nets. Zero chance. It's not happening unless they give me 10 first round picks, 20 first round picks. Like then maybe we can talk. Because you talk about Drew Holiday got 3 first rounders. Paul George got I think 5 and 2 swaps, something like that.
Something
Look,
like that.
yeah, James Harden is way better than Paul George. You saw what Paul George got you, and Paul George got great players back. The Nets don't even have those great players to give the Rockets. It doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. Like Ben Simmons, I know it's Daryl Morey. I know that they don't want to work the trade with them. That's the player that makes the most sense to go get. I also heard someone talk about the Celtics, maybe trying to get Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart. That's something I really like too because I think Jaylen Brown is one of those players that's kind of he's not blossoming the way he can because he has to play alongside Tatum and Kemba. Um, I think Jaylen Brown is a great piece. Smart is obviously a flippable piece. Any contender probably wants arguably the best defensive guard in the league on their team, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think Houston, it's time to rebuild. They started it off with Covington trade. They got the Westbrook trade. Who knows? John Wall might be exciting, might sell some tickets, but yeah, it's rebuild time.
And I just want to say, I'm just joking. I'm a Dallas fan all my life, so that's why I was just shitting on Houston. Love Houston. Love my Houston followers and listeners. So it's joking. But yeah, man, let's dive into this. Like, it is very confusing, right? Like they just for a year they're like, okay, let's listen to Morey, small ball. They traded for Robert Covington, traded a lot for him, right? They traded away Clint Capella as starting caliber center and a pick. Now they're like, yo, throw out the old regime. See ya Morey, see ya D'Antoni, see ya the small ball, right? So they ended up signing Christian Wood, DeMarcus Cousins. Like, yo, maybe we do need bigs, right? I think James Harden on the team, they're still going to be contending for a playoff spot,
Mhm.
right? But it's definitely not that 4 to 6 range where we usually see them. It's definitely going to be towards the bottom, right? And
Yeah, I
it
don't
just
see a
depends.
James Harden team missing the playoffs, right? So
Right.
so if James Harden plays, this is a playoff team.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
is he going to play? Is he going to be committed?
yeah, and like you mentioned, they definitely took steps back, right? Like
Mhm.
Westbrook, as bad as the fit was or whatever, Wall's way worse, right? Like at least Westbrook was healthy and playing, right? Like yeah, he has a little knee issue for a little bit, but let's be real, Wall has played 73 games in the past 3 seasons. He hasn't played a full season in the past 3 years, right? And that is ridiculous. So like at best, you're hoping he comes back. He's willing to be the number two guy. He can catch and shoot, which actually he's somewhat decent at. But like, yeah, you're expecting a lot of things and hoping a lot of things go right to actually for
Hey,
this trade to be beneficial.
hey, look, if we can if Houston Rockets somehow like finds a way to turn the injury slider off, I mean you've got John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. If this was 2016, we might be talking about, ooh, James Harden, John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins. Ooh,
Right.
that's a squad.
Not now, because I mean, yeah, with John Wall, he relies on his athleticism. He's a good defensive guard, but he's not going to drain threes, right? Like I don't know where you're really expecting with John Wall. He's just a good player. I mean, I don't know. He can steal the ball. I don't think there's too much of a difference between Westbrook and Wall. I think you just actually lose some, right? You lose some value.
Yeah.
You're losing the
So
rebounds for sure, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of what you're expecting, and yeah, like you said, I think they do need to rebuild. It'd be interesting to see where Harden does land up. I think the Nets don't make sense unless they get like Kyrie back, right? Like they need Kyrie. They need a couple
right, but
players.
you're gonna trade Kyrie before KD came there to play with Kyrie.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. If the Nets were going and they're like, no, this is a shit show, Kyrie's too toxic, maybe that's a trade you do. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
the Rockets need assets, they need picks, they need to rebuild. I looked at their bench and stuff, and I was like, yo, this is not really a good team. But let's see what happens there. It'll be interesting to see. Let's move on to the Memphis Grizzlies. They're kind of a question mark to me. They lost Jaren Jackson Jr. obviously, and he's gonna be out to start the season. They also have Justice Winslow that's injured, so he's gonna miss some time. And they didn't really do too much, right? They added some nice bench pieces. They added Desmond Bane, polished player from TCU who can drain his threes. He has high IQ and he's well seasoned. So I think he can come and step in and be pretty decent. But like, let's be real. Last season we enjoyed this team. Ja Morant was actually spectacular, right? And I think that'll be fun to watch again and see, once Jaren Jackson Jr. comes back and see how this team progresses. But I don't think they made any like nice splash moves to make them any better.
No, this is a wash off season, but this is a team. Look, we weren't expecting them to try to contend this year. It's okay, right? I think that they're still on the right trajectory. I'm not worried if I'm a Memphis Grizzlies fan. That's okay. Ja Morant is really. I think you can go all in on Ja Morant. So we'll see. I hope he takes another step forward this year.
Exactly. Like I think this team was just surprisingly good last year and ended up making the playoffs, right? Like or almost did. But the thing is, I think you have your own natural grown players. You have John Morant, you have Jaren Jackson Jr., and I think soon they'll have enough space to bring in like a star player to go with them, right? Maybe a nice wing, and I think they'll be fantastic. They did also draft Xavier Tillman. He's a defensive player. I think he'll be nice fit in with the team, and he won the Big Ten Player of the Year for defense. Bane had the most threes in the Big 12 last year. So, like I said, I think it's a pretty lateral move. They made some nice incremental changes, but I think this team has a bright future for sure.
Yeah, there was one big thing that did happen in Memphis this offseason, right? The Memphis Zoo got a big offseason pickup, getting a new giraffe in that they named Giraffe. So, and Ja Morant did meet Giraffe. There's an awesome video of that.
Nice.
So,
yeah.
that's a real big offseason pickup from Memphis.
For sure. Like a big front court, giraffe, long neck. But he's a little stiff though. Can't really move that well. So we'll see if he can adapt to that in the big league. But that's cool. Shout out to Ja Rap. I did not know that, but awesome stuff. Okay, let's move over to another team here. We got the Minnesota Timberwolves. Obviously they brought in D'Angelo Russell, and he's really cool with Cat. So let's see how that turns out. They had the number 1 pick. They took Anthony Edwards. They drafted Jaden McDaniels as well. They re-signed Malik Beasley. I think this team's set for the future, right? I don't think this year they're going to do anything. They could potentially like get enough wins to be in that like 9-10 range, I think. But I think this is like you're still waiting another year or two, see how Anthony Edwards fits with the team. And I think, in the future years, I think in 2 years they'll drop Rubio. They'll get $18 million in cap space, and let's see what they do from there.
And Rubio's a good pickup, especially because he probably doesn't have to be a starter on this team,
Yeah.
I don't know what to expect from Anthony Edwards, to be honest. But Russell and Cat looked like they were really enjoying playing with each other for the 2 games we got to see it.
Yeah.
So who knows? I think this is a cool team. Russell obviously did not work in Golden State, but I think he can work here. And Cat, look, there's very few players in this league more talented than Cat. We'll see. I know we've all been saying, I hope Cat takes that next step. I hope Cat takes that next step. I don't know. I probably said it every year for the last few years. But Cat's fantastic as a player.
Yeah.
All of the stats point to him being elite. Well, is it going to translate to wins? We'll see.
Exactly. And I think, starting off with a great big and, a really, really good shooter as a guard, and now, you drafted a nice wing. Let's see. That's really like a good foundation for a good team. Let's see how it works. But like I said, in my mind, I think this team's actually like probably a year, more likely 2 years away from actually being a nice contender. But I think they have nice pieces. They'll be fun to watch.
The major thing is with this team, right? You like if I'm the Timberwolves GM, the major thing is we got to keep Cat happy right now, right? If we think we're 1 2 years away, we got to make sure Cat's still on this team and bought in 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And D'Angelo Russell is going a big way in doing that.
Exactly. I mean, you're drafting as one of his closest friends, someone he wanted in the offseason when they couldn't trade for him, right? When they couldn't get him. So I think it's a great move for them, and let's see what happens. But like, let's talk about the rest of these teams. I think they're probably a couple years away from actually being, a contender, at least definitely for a finals contender. But like, these are teams like on the brink, right? They could potentially surprise us and make the playoffs, but they're kind of rebuilding here. So another team that fits that mold is the Sacramento Kings, right? Like the past few years, they've had really high picks. They have De'Aaron Fox. They paid him this summer. Gave him a max extension, and they have Marvin Bagley. I just don't know what else they're doing, right? They brought in Harrison Barnes. They paid him again, and I don't see this team being that good. I think
Right,
Fox
and
is
we don't know what's going on with Buddy Hield, right?
Exactly. They paid him a lot of money. They lost Bogdanovich. They paid Hield. He's not happy in Sacramento. You're paying Hield and Barnes $38 million together, right? I feel like that's not a great cap usage for any team.
Yeah, and the Bogdanovich thing was a train wreck with the with like the whole tampering in Milwaukee, and it's like, okay, you had agreed to trade him, then did it happen? He opted out. Like, what a train wreck of a situation.
If that went
Only
through,
the Kings.
if that went through, I think you could get some good pieces back, right? Some nice rotational pieces. Like I said, I think De'Aaron Fox is one of the best guards in the league that doesn't get talked about enough. Luckily, they had a high pick. They added Tyrese Halliburton, who will fit perfectly with De'Aaron Fox, right? But I think this team's just a couple years away. They need to figure out what they exactly have, right? Is Bagley their answer, or do they move on from him, right?
Yeah, they also need to figure that out about Luke Walton as well, right? Like, is he the coach? Is he not the coach? Like, they've got some question marks. Hopefully they can get some answers this season.
Yeah, so many questions. They had a good draft, though. I'll admit. Halliburton's a great pickup. Woodard, who's like a great shooter, is a solid pickup, and they brought in Jameis Ramsey from Texas Tech. So good stuff there. They have Bees Lisa as well, who's a great player. But yeah, I think just way too many question marks, and their future's pretty muddy. But let's see what happens. Another team that I don't think is going to make the playoffs is the San Antonio Spurs. The San Antonio Spurs, they had a nice draft. Devin Vassell, great player. Trey Jones, a solid player. But, I think next year is when you're looking at them. Because you know what? They're moving off Rudy Gay. They're moving off Aldridge, Patty Mills, and DeRozan, right? And that's $80 million in cap space they're going to free up. And I think they could make some nice moves. They have some great young, solid pieces, but I don't think they're going to contend for anything this year.
Yeah, and, the big news, they lost all-star coach Tim Duncan. But yeah, I don't know what to expect from this. This team honestly might be like nowhere near the playoffs, right? Like they might be a 14 seed,
No, for sure. That's kind of why I projected that. I think, they could surprise us as Pop still coaching. They have some nice, old vets that could do something.
DeRozan and Aldridge might go crazy, but yeah, we'll see. They seem like a team that's like built for 2016 in 2020, built for 2012, honestly.
Exactly. But yeah, like I said, I think next year they're freeing up $80 million in cap space, which is to blink at, right? That's amazing. They have some nice young talent, so I think they're a good team for the future, not this year.
Yeah, I can't wait to see them overpay a bunch of people who don't deserve it because no one wants to play in San Antonio. It's going to be great.
Well, let's talk about like the trade port of the NFL or the NBA, excuse me. The Oklahoma City Thunder, right? Like, which player did they not trade for at some point? They literally touched every single player and ended up trading them somewhere else.
Right. So you call them like the fry cooks because they're flipping everybody.
They literally are. All right. And I think that is actually fantastic. When you're small market, doing what they're doing is genius. So yeah, they added a lot of small pieces. I don't think anything makes a difference here. They did use Pokusevsky, who's the Serbian Scorpion. The great thing about the Thunder drafting him is he's a European player. He needs to develop, but he could potentially be one of the best players in this draft, right? He just needs to build that body. He's a big that can shoot threes and does some great things. He just needs time, and they have all the time in the world right now. They also traded for Al Horford, right? They took on that bad contract. That's someone you can flip later on to a playoff team that wants him, right? Or you end up buying him out. He's just someone, to keep your team interesting. And I think you just build around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, right? Like he's a good star, I think, in this league in the future, and he's a good piece. But yeah, they just have they had so many trades. We can't even talk about it. That'd be a whole nother episode just to talk about all the trades. But
right, I mean, you're just looking at the number of players. Well, like I'm looking at like players acquired here, right? I got a list. It's like, oh my God, look at this list, and then it's like, oh, players lost. And look, I think Trevor Ariza's still on their team right now. That's a player that's going to get flipped.
George Hill,
Horford might get flipped. Justin Jackson might get flipped. George Hill might get flipped. I don't even know what is happening with this team. But look, they are a team that's going to be scary 5 years from now.
Exactly. That's literally what I said. I wrote down here. I was like, check back in a few years. Small market. They can just trade those picks, get a star that's a little disgruntled with their team, right? Trade for a player that has too many, for a team that has too many players at high values. Trade for those players. They have enough assets for it. So I think in a couple of years you're gonna have some young players come in, and you're gonna trade for some nice vets. And I think this team will be good. Probably 3 to 5 years from now for sure.
Yeah, and look, they have. I honestly like in the 2023 draft, it may be them picking 1 through 30. So like we'll see. I mean, they have picks on picks on picks on picks, and exactly. If they get some lottery luck here or there, who knows?
Yeah, and flipping Paul George and at the same time you flip Westbrook, like that was genius. And like we said, like they traded away Chris Paul, they got in Kelly Oubre, traded Oubre for some assets. I mean, like this is a genius way, right? Like if you're an Oklahoma City fan, you might be like, oh man, we have like garbage on our team, but like the future's super bright, right? Like this many picks, you'll definitely get some studs in the draft. You can also use some of these assets to get in some star players that probably wouldn't sign with you in free agency. And I think that's huge. And I think another thing is Billy Donovan did step down as the head coach, right? So they also have a new head coach in. He's not in any rush to win right now. He's just trying to see what he has to work with and develop some of these younger players.
Yeah, just an exciting. I think it's just an exciting team. Like when you talk about tanking, right? What you can do what the 76ers did a few years ago. What OKC did is way more exciting. Like that's a true that's like the real process, man. I'm so pumped for OKC.
For sure, one of these gems to look at in the future. And like we said, there's quite a few teams contending. There's some that are looking in the future, but I think the future's bright for the Thunder and a lot of these teams. So it'll be fun to watch. And after this, we'll actually talk about the teams in the East. We'll talk about the contenders and some of the teams that definitely aren't contending, because I think the East, it's definitely different from the West, right? Like we love the West, your team's in the West, my team's in the West, and I think there's just so many good contenders. The West is always stacked. When you look at the East, it's just like, I don't know. There's just a couple of teams that are a handful, but like I said,
to be honest, this might be the deepest East we've ever seen. So
exactly, when you pay attention to this past year and this future year, you're like so many new healthy players coming back, so many trades that were made or offseason acquisitions, and I think it's actually going to be a good East team, but definitely not the same as the West though. Still got moves to make to get there.
See. But the NBA seems like it's getting more and more stacked by the days. And that is the way offseason works. That's the way the hype works. The hype machine always gets you. I'm sure when we'll laugh at this episode and be like, look at East, they got some terrible teams at the bottom again. But right now I'm kind of looking at them a little hyped. So
yeah, but I mean, that's a good wrap up for the West, and we're looking forward to the East. Yeah, all right. Well, that was a great wrap up for the Western Conference. I subbed out Dav and brought in my other teammate out here, and we have Ryan Azadi for the Eastern Conference. So, hey, let's dive in deep into the Eastern Conference. We're going to talk a little bit less about the Eastern Conferences because, like I said, our teams were on the West, so we spent a little bit more time there. But let's kick it off
because it's trash.
I think it has been for the past decade. It's definitely not the same as the West, but this year I think it's actually way more interesting. Let's jump in with the contenders. All right, we'll start with the Milwaukee Bucks, who ended up trading like 3 first-round picks, 2 pick swaps, a couple of their point guards, and they ended up getting Drew Holiday. I think that's a fantastic pickup. Surrounding your star who you're trying to make re-sign with your team, right? In a small market, bringing him another all-star type player, someone that is like one of the best point guard like defensive players, right? And he can also score on offense. I think that is a fantastic move. I think blowing the Bogdanovich trade, that kind of like shot themselves in the foot with that
I
one.
was just about to say that. I was like, and it was great they got Bogdanovich. Oh wait, I'm just kidding. It didn't happen because all these moves are trying to keep Giannis. That's the primary reason they're gonna make these big moves. Number one, to keep Giannis. Number two, to win. And I think given Drew Holiday is amazing, they're gonna have a solid starting lineup with him in it. But their depth got hit. They lost Bledsoe, Hill, Wes Matthews, Robin Lopez, and one of the best 3-pointers of all time in Kyle Korver. And they picked up Augustine and Bobby Portis, which aren't bad, but I think their depth, they're going to have to add a couple more pieces if they're going to make a run. But their starting five is going to be a rock solid starting five.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
Giannis hasn't signed yet, has he?
He has not signed the Supermax as of yet, right now. We'll still see. I mean, maybe the Bogdanovich thing was like the thing he was waiting on, and then he would have signed. But now he's like, maybe I'm reconsidering, right?
I think it was because I think he was friends with him, right? Or yeah,
Uh,
he wanted him at least. He wanted him.
yeah, I heard that he's definitely like a little upset that didn't go through, and of course, who wouldn't be? But I think also it's pretty nice that you get to keep some of those assets like DiVincenzo, who's a good player for them last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they can do some things. I mean, yeah, you're right. They might need some bench help. I think they have enough depth to like keep it going through the season, but they might have to end up sending, I guess, some second-round picks since they don't really have any first-round picks for a little bit of bench help. But like you mentioned, well, getting DJ Augustine, I think that is a great some guard depth. Someone that can really pour it in as a bench guard, and he's done it for like every year in and year out. Yeah, bringing Augustine in, that's good. Bobby Portis, I think he didn't really get the time to shine with the New York Knicks, but he was a pretty good player with the Bulls. So let's see what he can bring to the table. But yeah, I mean, obviously last season, everyone had them as a favorite in the East. They blew it in the playoffs, right? They had a lot of things going on. It's really tough. So hopefully they have enough power to get through the finals. And I think that'll be a really fun matchup, whoever they're playing in.
And hopefully they find some team chemistry as well.
Yeah,
Just
totally.
getting a big player like Drew Holiday, it's important to find that chemistry.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to another contender here, and that is the Boston Celtics. Okay. The Boston Celtics, they did a few moves. All right. They drafted Aaron Nesmith, who we really love. Like, he's a great 3-and-D player. He's coming off a broken foot, though. So let's see how long that takes to heal and if he stays healthy. But I think that's a great piece they added. They added Tristan Thompson as, a backup center. I think that's a nice move. And they added Jeff Teague. Obviously, they lost Brad Wanamaker in free agency, so they added some guard depth. And Jeff Teague's
they lost Gordon Hayward in free agency too.
Yeah, they lost Gordon Hayward, but luckily they got like 2 second-round picks, out of it. They also lost Enes Kanter as well, right? I don't think the Gordon Hayward thing's that big of a deal. He had missed so much time. Whatever he signed for Boston, like he kept getting injured, missed a lot of the seasons, really, a lot of the playing time. So I think they're kind of better off just moving away from him.
And I think they proved that they can win without him. He was just an added piece. Their big three really is Smart, Brown, and Tatum. And I think they're going to depend on that big three. And I think Tristan Thompson is an upgrade versus Kanter because I think they have enough offensive power and Kanter wasn't a great defender, but Tristan Thompson is all around athleticism. So I think that's a good pickup. Teague, I don't know. He's falling.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of washed, but like for guard depth, that's pretty good though.
For
and like you
mentioned,
mentioned,
5-10 minutes off the bench, sure.
Right, and Enes Kanter is kind of the lanky type build, whereas Tristan Thompson is the bulky kind of center you'd like, and I think they'll definitely benefit them for sure. And like I said, I think they just have a really good roster. They have good chemistry going on. Like you mentioned, Smart, Brown, Tatum. That's a great trio to build around, and I think they could do some work. Let's see. Tatum's only in going into his 4th year now. He's gotten better. In the past year, he really elevated his game. So I want to see if either Brown or Tatum can get a little bit better, right? They don't need to. They're actually like doing so well, but let's see if they can take that next step. And I think that definitely push them towards the finals next year.
Yeah, if Nesmith can prove to be something, they're going to have a definitely strong trio. But I think the unique thing is Tatum's going to be their top dog, but Tatum isn't like a LeBron or an AD or someone who's a leader, so it's going to be more team ball. So it's going to be interesting in the era of a big three if that's going to work.
Yeah, and they definitely did a great job last year, right? They went a little bit deeper than a lot of people thought they would. But yeah, always
You
like a
thought they
really
would.
talented. Yeah, I definitely thought they would. And like you said, now they moved away from Kyrie Irving, the toxicity for a few years now. They've moved away from someone they're spending so much money on and is always injured. So you got this raw young core, and I think this team's gonna be really good for the future years. And like you said, they'll definitely make a push, I think, for the finals this year. Let's move on to the Philadelphia 76ers. Ryan, do you want to talk about some of the moves they made in the offseason?
Yeah, so I think the 76ers actually made very, very smart moves. You can tell the direction where they're going. They added three-point shooters on their team, and Danny Green, Steph Curry, and Ryan Brokow, two of them which were former Dallas Mavs players.
Yeah.
And then they also added Howard to help with D off the bench as big, and added Terrence Ferguson, which is kind of like plus him and Curry, you get Josh Richardson. So you got that extra D. So I think what they're doing, what they did this offseason is really to help Embiid and to help Simmons, especially with the three-point shot, and they did that. So I think if Simmons comes back healthy, I think 76ers is going to be right up there. They could make a push for sure.
For sure, you see them making a change in management. Obviously, they brought in Daryl Morey from the Rockets. He's like a master
maneuver.
Rivers. Yeah, they brought in Glenn Rivers, aka Doc Rivers, but call him Glenn Rivers. Bringing in his son-in-law, that's fantastic, right? But like you mentioned, like I think when you look at the team, they're a talented team, right? Embiid and Simmons, that's a good duo that should work. Daryl Morey was like, I'm gonna make sure we try it at least one more time. And they surrounded, like you said, they brought in Danny Green, they got in Seth Curry and Ryan Brokoff, right? People that can shoot threes, because Simmons can't, right? He can facilitate really well, he can defend really well, he doesn't shoot threes. So you bring in some great shooters, and I think they'll definitely benefit the team. Hopefully in the season you're trying to look for Joel Embiid to stay healthy. You want Simmons healthy as well, and let's see what happens. But I think they made some good moves. Bringing in Dwight Howard for the minimum deal, right? Like that is fantastic. You get some great bench depth. We saw how that worked with the Lakers, right? When AD's out, you bring in Dwight Howard. He's energetic. He looks really good, and I think that's a great deal. I think, they also killed it in the draft, right? They drafted Tyrese Maxey, who's a guard out of Kentucky here. He's a solid pick. He can knock down shots and make awesome plays on offense and on defense, right? I think he's a good guard you can, pair up with, Simmons and Embiid, and he can really step in. They also drafted Isaiah Joe. He's a guard from Arkansas, great three-point threat and a good on-ball defender. And they wrapped up their draft by drafting Paul Reed, a big from DeVry University that can defend multiple positions and he's super athletic. So I think they added a lot of bench depth, a lot of players that will really help this team go. And I'm really looking forward for this team, right? I want this to work out. And, I think if it doesn't work, they go through half the season and it's not working out, I definitely think they'll move on from Simmons or Embiid.
Agreed.
Yeah, man. It'll definitely be interesting to see who they go after and what kind of assets they get back. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to this team. Hopefully they can take that step forward. Let's, maybe we should have started off with this team. Let's talk about the team that actually made the finals from the East, right? That is the Miami Heat. Ryan, you want to go over what their additions and subtractions were?
The Heat, basically their biggest subtraction was Jay Crowder. But what they did in the beginning of the offseason, they said, we're signing Dragic back, we're signing Adebayo back. And they did that. That was the biggest, I think that was the biggest things. And they did lose Jay Crowder, which is huge, but they still got Iggy from what I understand. And they signed Harkless and Bradley, which Bradley's a great on-ball defender for the ones and twos. And Harkless can bring some energy off the bench. So I think they pretty much made a balanced trade, and with a balanced trade off there, and then with the young talent they already have that can develop after another year and the experience they got in the finals, I think Butler can lead this squad with a healthy Dragic and Adebayo. I think the squad can be something to be reckoned with too.
Yeah, I think, Bam can take that next step up. Obviously, the chemistry is really well there. I think it was genius to just bring back, the pieces you could, right? They wanted Goran Breck. They're like, he's a leader. He's a vet. He does, they didn't have him for most of the playoffs, right? The finals, they didn't have him. Bringing in, Bam, he'll be healthier next year. I think it's a great thing. Losing Jay Crowder is a big deal. I think he's a great veteran presence. I think he's a great 3-and-D guy and a great forward for sure. But like you said, they did some good moves. Bring in Avery Bradley, someone that can defend. He's also a good, offensive option as well at guard. As well, like you mentioned, they signed their star. They signed Bam, 5-year extension. Obviously you're going to build around Bam and Butler. And I think the genius thing here is they signed a lot of these players back for 2-year deals. So in 2 years, a lot of these older players, they might be done. You don't know what's going to happen. And they probably have enough money to bring in like a number 3 option for the Heat. So I think their future's super bright, and I'm looking forward to it. They also drafted Precious, and he's a great big. He's kind of like a Bam type. You'd be perfect playing with him. He's a big that brings energy, can guard multiple positions, and he's a versatile scorer. So I think they had a pretty good offseason. I definitely do think, though, the Jay Crowder thing is a big loss. Mm-hmm. And so let's move on to another team here. This is the Toronto Raptors, or maybe the Tampa Raptors, wherever they're playing. They're playing in Florida this year, right? And I mean, what did you think about their moves? They obviously re-signed Van Fleet, which is great, right? They kind of needed that. They obviously lost Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol, right? Like they lost 2 of their main bigs, the vets over there, and they signed Aaron Baines and Alex Len as backup options, substitutes for them. But what do you think about those?
And we signed Chris Boucher.
Yeah. So what do you think about those moves?
Honestly, I'm concerned for the Raptors because they've replaced the bigs, but I do think it's a downgrade from what they had. I think Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol are hard to replace in this league. And secondly, I think they sorely lacked in wing depth, and I didn't see any moves that helped with that issue. And so I'm so kind of concerned, especially seeing some of these other teams that made major moves, if they can really compete in that 1 through 4 range.
Yeah, exactly. I think they kind of took a step back, to be honest. It's nice to retain their players like Van Fleet, but I mean, Kyle Lowry had a great, bubble season, and in the playoffs he was really well as well. But I mean, I think missing those bigs and that veteran presence will probably hurt them and bite them a little bit. But I think you're trying to look in this upcoming season. Can Pascal Siakam be, an all-star player season round, and maybe even elevate his game in the playoffs? Because obviously last year we kind of saw him fizzle, right? Spicy P was mild at best, right? And we were just it's kind of disappointing, and that's kind of why they lost, because he's kind of like the star they're building around now. Obviously you got the veteran presence with Kyle Lowry, and you got Van Fleet, but like I think Siakam's the guy you're kind of building around and seeing exactly, can he be consistent, can he take his game to the next level? And I think that's what they're looking at this upcoming season.
Yeah, that's a great point. If he's able to elevate his game, then I think they have a chance. If he's not, it's going to be a struggle.
Right. Yeah, I think in the future they definitely need to bring in a big,
a veteran presence.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I think that'd be a nice little thing you could go on Lowry, Siakam, and a nice big, or in the future Van Fleet, Siakam, and a big. Let's move on to a team that really sucked last year, but had some nice surprises. And, now they're getting healthy. They're bringing back some stars. It's the Brooklyn Nets. Shout out to Brooklyn, right? No sleep till Brooklyn. Beastie Boys right there. So they re-signed Joe Harris, which I think is a great deal. He's a great shooter. They gave him 4 for $72. I think that's a pretty reasonable deal. A lot of people would want him on their team. Obviously, I mean, the biggest additions here is Kevin Durant, right? Bringing him back healthy. Let's see what he can do. I think that's the greatest offseason addition of any team, right? Bringing back Kevin Durant. Let's see what he and Kyrie look like, right? Or that big 3 with DeAndre Jordan, right? How's that going to work? Like I mentioned, they kind of have some stars that showed up last year, right? Do you want to talk about some of those players? And real quickly on the deals, they added Landry Shamet, they added Jeff Green, and obviously they brought in a new coaching staff as well, right? They brought in Steve Nash, Mike D'Antoni's assistant coach, and you know what? Shout out to the homeboy Amari Stoudemire. He's on the staff as well. But let's talk about this team real quick. What are your thoughts on them?
Oh, we got a Phoenix Sun rejuvenation over here.
Right. At worst, if the players are doing bad, just throw Steve Nash and Amari back there. Let's get it rolling.
That would be awesome. No, like you said, you got KD back. You're going to be contending. I don't care what anybody says. You're going to be contending with KD. I think Kyrie was hurt a lot last year. So if Kyrie's mind is in the right place and he stays healthy with KD, and then you got Joe Harris, who's a premier 3-point shooter in this league, to get him those touches. I think that's why they signed him for the contract, because that's a valuable piece to have on that team. And then you mentioned some of the young stars. You got Jared Allen, you got Levert, you got Dinwiddie.
Yeah.
Those are nice options to have too. I mean, you got a lot of options now. KD leading the bunch is going to be, and then you added Shemet as a defender, Jeff Green as. I mean, there's depth there with DeAndre Jordan. You got depth in almost every position. So if
Yeah.
everybody stays healthy, that with KD, if KD should be back at his best, that's gonna be tough.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here is you're gonna spend the first few weeks just trying to see how they all gel together, right? What does KD look like? Can Kyrie, be more facilitator instead of, handling the ball all the time? And like you said, they have some good pieces. I think they might have to end up flipping those pieces, right? Like KD's obviously the star you're trying to build around, right? I think Kyrie's even flippable, right? Obviously they want to play together, so let's see what happens there. But like a Dinwiddie, a Levert versus a Jarrett Allen versus DeAndre, right? Which one do you keep? I think you could possibly flip some of these pieces to try to build around what better suits their style of play. So it'll be interesting to see. But like I said, best offseason addition is bringing back KD to play in this season, and I think that'll be a fun team to watch this upcoming year. Let's throw the ball to probably the team that made the most offseason moves. It's the Atlanta Hawks. All right, like, oh my God, how much money did they have to spend? They just like signed every single free agent out here. Obviously, they got Danilo Gallinari for 3 years and 62 million. The third year, I think there's only 5 million guaranteed, so they could step off in 2 years. They brought in Rondo, they brought in Chris Dunn, Bogdan Bogdanovic. They also added, Solomon Hill and Tony Snell for some bench depth. But obviously, they lost to Jeff Teague, not a big deal, and Vince Carter retired. But what are your thoughts about the Atlanta Hawks?
Well, I'll miss you, Vinsanity. It's a big deal to me. I'll miss you, Vinsanity. But I think the Hawks are doing everything in their power to get the Mavs pick that they traded to Atlanta for Luka Doncic, Trae Young. I think they're trying to get him pieces, get him some playmakers, get him some shooters, get him some defenders, get him whatever he needs to make that team competitive. And I think clearly they went all out this offseason to see what he can do now that he gets some weapons. And I think Gallinari is a great weapon. He's a great offensive mind. Then you still got John Collins. And I mean, Rondo, Dunn can create. I mean, they got weapons now. So I think this is a year to see if Hawks can prove themselves as a contender, or at least someone that can make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think there's always this false narrative of like, oh man, Luca gets all the shine, Trae Young doesn't. I mean, as a big master myself, I know Trae Young's like one of the best young players in the league, and he's amazing to watch. I think you love to see what the Hawks management did here, surrounding your star with as many weapons as you can. I think it's interesting. I'm interested to see what the starting lineup is, right, and what their bench is, and I think you might end up seeing them flip some of the pieces or maybe even try to trade for a bigger star later on. Like you've got a lot of assets going on. You could add some picks or whatever, but like they have like 3 really big bigs right now. Like they have Gallinari, which is like more of a power forward right now. They have Clint Capella there. They have John Collins.
Oh, forgot
They
about
even
him.
they even drafted a Kongwu, which is like a do it all big, who's a versatile defender, right? So I kind of want to see what that rotation looks like. Like you mentioned, they added a great guard in right? He's a defensive-minded guard, which you could really pair up with Young. Rondo, I think he's also defensive-minded and a really smart player and a vet presence in the locker room never hurts anybody. So definitely looking forward to how this team looks like next year. They'll definitely be even more exciting than usual. And I just love what they did, to be honest.
I forgot about Clint Capella. He was signed last year, but if he played very minimally. So I'm excited to see that too. That having that big that you can alley oop to and having all those weapons, that should be interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see what Trae Young and the Hawks can do with those weapons now.
Right. And now I'm just going to briefly talk about some of these teams that are like on the border and definitely probably not making the playoffs. We'll start with the Indiana Pacers. They took Nate McMillan out. He's out as coach. They brought in another Nate Bjorken as the head coach. Let's see what they look like, right? Miles Turner, Victor Oladipo. You got Brogdon there. You got TJ Warren, right? Like you got some nice names. I think they're missing that number 1 star player. So maybe you can flip 1 or 2 pieces, maybe trade Oladipo, who was on his last year, and some assets and bring in 1 star. But I think they have a nice lineup, right? They have a really good lineup that could actually do things in the future. And you bringing back Sabonis, who's going to be healthy. I definitely think this team could make the playoffs, but I think they're missing that number 1 option for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And they really didn't do anything this offseason. They stayed put. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not. With this same team the past couple of years, they've been kind of stuck in the first round of the playoffs. So I'm not sure. Again, I think a couple of these teams really added some good pieces. So I think it might be the same story a new chapter, same story.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I definitely do. I think they have like a bunch of number twos, right? Great number twos, number three options out here, but they need that number one, and with that, they could do great things. I'm actually kind of glad they didn't end up with Gordon Hayward. They tried to go for him. I think he's actually beneficiary to them. Let's move on to the Washington Wizards. They obviously Houston. They traded away John Wall. They brought in Russell Westbrook. Other moves they made, they re-signed Bertrand for 5 years, $80 million, pretty good deal. And they also drafted Denny Avdija with the number 9 pick. He's a great forward. When you look at the Wizards, they have this nice youth movement going on. Isaac Bonga, Troy Brown Jr., Thomas Bryant, Rui Hachimura, excuse me. But I think they have this nice youth movement going on. Let's see if Beal stays. I don't think this trade helps Beal stay, to be honest. I think he's still going to leave during free agency. But I think bringing in Russell Westbrook and Beal, I think that's a nice backcourt. I think they can do things. And if Beal leaves, at least have another star that can try to push you to the playoffs, and at least he's someone that will fill the seats.
Like we mentioned like I think having Westbrook with Beal, I think I'll get him to the playoffs, but I think that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of want to see what the youth movement is, right? Like some of these young pieces, if they take that next step. Denny, he's from Europe, and I just want to see how he progresses and if he can, crack the starting lineup during the season. But yeah, I don't think this is a contending team. I think they have enough bench depth and starter power to make the playoffs, like maybe as a 9th, 10th type seed, 8th seed, but I don't think they're going far at all. Let's mention the other teams real quick. The Orlando Magic with Jonathan Isaac out. I don't see them as a playoff contender. Definitely not a finals contender at all. But, they had a nice draft. They added Cole Anthony, Greg Anthony's son. When you look at the Bulls, I think they have a nice little rebuild going on. They brought in Billy Donovan, who's actually one of the better coaches out here. They drafted Pat Williams, which I thought was kind of a reach here. And, I think they're just kind of like figuring out what they have. They have a lot of pieces. They traded for Otto Porter Jr. a couple years ago. They have a couple of pieces. They're just trying to see what they have. I don't think they're contending this year.
And they got some young talent with Larry Markkinen and Zach LaVine. I don't know. I think they need another piece.
Yeah, I think they just need to see what they have and either flip them, bring in a star type player, maybe like a Jimmy Butler type. Would be nice in Chicago. That's a joke because Chicago Bulls really smart. But
maybe a Derrick Rose type.
And we'll talk about the other few teams real right quick. We got the Charlotte Hornets, added LaMelo Ball. I think he'll be fun to watch. They added Gordon Hayward, waived Batum, brought back Biyombo, and drafted Jaden McDaniels, who I think is a good player. I don't think they're contending right now. They need to figure out what they have. They have 3 guards, Graham, Terry Rozier, and LaMelo Ball. They need to flip one for a big or a wing or something and figure it out. When you look at New York Knicks, they're definitely not contending. They added some nice pieces: Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, Elfrey Payton, Austin Rivers, Obi Toppin in the draft, and Emmanuel Quickley. They lost, obviously, Gibson and Portis, who they cut. It's a weird mix of veterans and youth, right? I think they just need to see what they have. They have R.J. Barrett, Kevin Knox, Mitchell Robinson, and the new draftees. And you just want to see what you have and kind of build around these stars, And maybe you flip off some of the vets you just signed and to a contending team. But I think they're still waiting for that big star to sign with the Knicks.
I think this is the same story as last year, next chapter.
Yeah, exactly. And right here we got the Detroit Pistons. I think they killed it in the draft. They drafted Killian Hayes, who could be one of the best prospects, that come out of this draft. Sadiq Bey, someone we love, a great 3-and-D prospect, and Isaiah Stewart, like a big bulky center. They did some weird things. They obviously they got DeLon Wright back. Matched him with the Dwayne Casey, the head coach that actually drafted him with the Toronto Raptors. They signed Jahlil Okafor, Mason Plumlee, Jeremy Grant, a bunch of these names, and you're just like, what are they doing, right? Like, why'd you sign all these bigs? You already have Blake Griffin there. I don't know. They're definitely rebuilding. They need to flip some of these pieces and build around the rookies they just drafted, I think, and they'll be in a good spot.
And figure out if Blake Griffin has a couple years left in him or he needs to be traded for something or what they want to do with Blake Griffin. Because I think he has potential to be a star. I just don't know.
Yeah,
and in Detroit.
I don't think he's in Detroit either. He also has a player option for next year for $38 million. I don't think he's declining that by any means. So let's see what he has there. They have Derrick Rose still for one more year. I think they need to flip him to a contending team for sure. And they also came to an agreement with Devdas Sirvadas, who they drafted from Europe. We actually traded with them, Mavs and Pistons. He signed a 3-year deal. I think he has some upside, so let's see what he can do. And lastly, we got the Cleveland Cavaliers here. I mean, you got Andre Drummond. You're paying him like the max. You're paying Kevin Love the max out here. And you have like a lot of small guards. You know, the guards they drafted, Darius Garland and Colin Sexton the past few years, they're both 6'1", and they're both starting, right? It doesn't make sense. I think you need to figure out what's good, maybe flip Kevin Love to a contending team that wants him, and, you know, figure out what the future pieces are, but they just need to obtain some assets here.
Yeah. Yeah. God bless you, Kevin Love.
Yeah, but God bless you, Kevin Love. He thought he was playing with LeBron for the next few years, right? That sucks. But that wraps up this episode. You know, we did a great job talking about the Western and Eastern conferences. Let us know what your favorite teams are and what you're looking forward to in the next year. We'll definitely do our predictions next week, and we're looking forward to that. But thanks again for listening and tuning in. And once again, I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I'm excited for the NBA season. And until next time, we're out. See ya.